It's my pleasure to introduce Mike Giles tonight, or Mikey, as most of you here probably know him as. It goes without saying that Mikey's very experienced yachty. Why do I say that? Because he's completed many Barleys, Sydney Hobarts, Darwin Splash, probably every offshore race on this coast multiple times. He also gives his time freely, again, as many of you know, in event organisation here, event director for Bali, and now for the upcoming Exmouth Race and Rally event. So the big roles where you need experienced people. And Mike and his yacht in Dolphin has also done substantial cruising as well as the racing, cruising through Indonesia and Kimberley's and many other places. So it's my privilege tonight to welcome experienced fellow yachty Mike Giles about things that can go wrong. I'm sure we're all going to take something away from this tonight, so hopefully this doesn't happen to us. Thank you, and everybody, please welcome Mike Giles.
Thanks a lot. Just at the outset, this is a warts and all expose, I guess. When you're in charge of a boat, as I was, the responsibility is with me. So anything that happened ends up with me, regardless of, it's all my decisions, with a bit of help from my friends all the way down there. So just bear that in mind, that I am responsible. I put it on the beach. I cost Peter a hell of a lot of money to get it off, and put a lot of people, and especially my crew, in danger. So, it was a bit of, luckily nobody died on our boat. They did on another boat. So it's fairly sobering to see what can happen. And there's a lot of things thrown at us in this 24-hour period. And in hindsight, there's lots of things we could have done to improve it. So I'll just, we've got Thor's helped me with us. Well, he's done it. We've got a PowerPoint, and I'll talk to a lot of the slides. And when it comes to the actual explanations of what happened, I might be calling on my friend Paul there, and Max, if he's somewhere around. I don't know where Max is.
I'm not Max.
I haven't seen Max yet. Who were both on the boat with him.
That's fairly typical.
Yeah, typical. Yeah, he's probably under a log. Okay, so this M3, as you know from Cherry's shirt, was calm. Peter Hickson bought it and raced it here for a year or so, and then decided to do Hobart with Brent Fowler. That's what ended up. That's where we ended up. But as it was a soft landing. Right, so Peter and his crew and Brent, they got the boat ready. They trucked it over. Macca took it over. They did a lot of work on it in preparations for the race. And when they got there, they had some. They discovered some problems with the keel mounting and a few problems around the structure of the support for the keel. So they were faced with a hell of a lot of work in a short period of time, which meant the boat, even though it was really well prepared for the race, they'd done minimum, well, virtually no sailing prior to the start of the race, which sort of resulted in them not being able to test the systems out. So when they started the Hobart, they'd had the rig freshly in. The forestay, there was a problem with the forestay where it attached to the rig, which was, was a fault that somebody should have picked up, but the rig was put in by a third party, so they didn't. So they got not even to the last turning mark, and they lost the forestay. So that resulted in a change of plans. Myself, Paul and Max were going to fly to Tassie and bring the boat back, which sort of didn't happen. So we changed our flights to Sydney, and they decided to do the Coffs race. It was a completely different crew. There was the three of us. Max was navigating. We got there. That's for you, Duffy. He had a run-in with a tree riding his bike home one night, and he's had his arm in a sling, so he was only one arm, but he was still pretty healthy. So Max with one arm is better than most of the two. The rest of the crew were made up of people from Sydney, a couple from here, but none of them were part of the Hobart group. It's a traditional race. It often has a little bit of a few of the fast boats that do the Hobart, but a lot of the boats that don't make Hobart for various reasons. The year we did it, had Bo Jess, which is 80-footer, who got line on us, and they were only about 3 hours in front of us. We got second. It's a similar length race to our Geraldton, which we've done one or two, I think. And so it's a 24-hour race or less for those boats. The wind conditions was light. Wasn't a quick race, even though it was close to the record. It started in virtually no breeze at all. We've got a bit of a video here, which is to give us obviously the weather that we had on the day for the next 24 hours. So with the preparation, we picked the boat up from CYC and we took it around to Pittwater. That's with about 6 or 7 of the crew, I think, Paul. Put it at Royal Prince Alfred, stayed the night there and loaded up the next day for the race. It's a really good club, well supported, good facilities. And it's a really interesting bunch of people, real from all walks of life. Because it's not the Hobart. You get a lot of other people that just don't do those sorts of races. I had an acquaintance there who had a Sydney 47 like mine called Jem, which we had a bit of a interesting evening with. So I'll just let that run through a bit faster. It's Bogus is 80 foot. I think there was a couple of pictures in there, but the conditions were pretty mild. The race was slow to start with, and then a little bit of a spinnaker run, but mostly reaching, and the breeze filled in from the south, so the boats. The slower boats, or the smaller boats, they did a lot better on handicap in the end. So that's the course, it just wanders up, and obviously the way back is pretty similar. The difference with going up is you've got a lot of current against you. Now there's a lot of questions asked as why we left when there was a lot of breeze forecast. Well, the forecast was, as you can see from that, was there wasn't a lot of breeze. The forecast was for light northerly breezes. The breeze picked up leading up to the post-event for a couple of days, and then we waited for the weather window, which came on the 5th, where there was virtually no wind, and the wind that was there was from the north and northeast, bit of northwest, but all around the place. The biggest problem was the swell, because it's been blowing 20-25 knots for the last 3 or 4 days. There was a lot of swell from the south, and there was a bit of a weather system towards New Zealand, which had a swell in the other direction, but it was flat. Okay, so we, after lots of discussions and discussions with other boats, there was a boat close to us, Margaret Rintoul. There was obviously the guy, Jem, who've done lots and lots of sailing up and down the coast, so we talked to them about it. And being a delivery, being that all of the delivery sales were in Tasmania, because they got sent on a truck, we only had the race sales, which sort of limited what we did. So we decided we'd put a reef in. It was a brand new main, it was the first time being used, and small head saws. And you see from that, we had plenty of time to get back. We had, you know, the weather was, we had about 40 hours plus. When we were working our calculations out, we didn't worry about the current, and it was up to 2 knots current helping us, so it was a pretty easy trip in the end, or it was supposed to be. So on the crew was myself, supposedly the responsible one. Max, who was the navigator, who had his arm in and out of the sling for the trip, but he's pretty good. It wasn't a drama. Paul, right, Paulie there, who I've done more miles with than anybody else, and I trust. Yeah, I don't think he trusts me anymore, but certainly Alan, his wife, doesn't. Farris, who he actually, I understand he came down on and was crewed on Super Sled, which was the old Fusey or whatever it was, or which ended up, did the Bali, Tony works for Bali. But he's a professional sailor, and he brought a TP52 down from Asia for the Hobart race, and he was on the dock looking for something to do, so they should grab him. And Harry, who comes from a notable sailing family, lots of experience, in his 30s, big guy, lots of big boat sailing, so it was a pretty good crew actually. The boat was as ready as ever been, because they'd done a lot of work pre-Hobart, so it was ready to go, food, everything. So that carried over to the way back. We didn't really need to buy anything, there was plenty of fuel. And the boat had been through from top to bottom when it was at the boatyard pre-Hobart. So we had, because the 5 of us, we did know each other. Obviously I know Paul and Max pretty well, but the other 2, I had met them before, but in Sydney in a previous Hobart, but that was I didn't really know and didn't know their capabilities. We didn't tackle the delivery lightly. We did do a lot of work on it, and because we had 2 days to sit around twiddling our thumbs until the breeze stopped. So during that time, we were talking to everybody, all and sundry. It's not having actually done that bit of the coast before. You need to find everything out if you can. The weather forecast was good. Yeah, not much breeze. So that's sort of what we were looking at when we left. This is where the wheels started to fall off a little bit. We'd set up prior to going that Paul would be a watch leader, I'd be a watch leader, Max would float, and Harry, the other 2 guys would be on our watches. Well, unfortunately, it was because of the sea conditions, and maybe a little bit we had the night before, the 2 youngest members of the crew were a little bit sick. So we let them sleep. They went off mid-morning, got up at 6. So what I did was I deviated from the plan we had, because if Paul had been watch captain, I had what ensured would not have happened, not without a lot of discussion anyway. So Paul and I decided to go off watch together. We'd change watch around. The other 2 guys then would run their watch together, and I mean they're good yachties. I mean they know their stuff, just a bit young. And we had discussed, obviously no spinnakers, no coloured sails, basic sails. And we had the two, two small head sails, the number 4 and the number 5, which are the tiny sails. That's all we're going to use because there's plenty of fuel in the motor, flat seas. So Paulie and I went to bed. About half an hour later, there was a rattle and a clank and a bang and what have you. And Max was having a spell as well. Stuck my head up, swore a bit as there was an A7 up. So they put a spinnaker up, which yeah. So we, but again, it's I don't blame them. It's me. I obviously didn't make the plan or the requirement for them to let us know what if they did change from the plan we had to let us know. That's you really need to know your crew, trust your crew, and if they decide to do something, they need to tell you. So, and you need to tell them what you're going to do as well. All right, so this is getting into the evening, just about the time when everything started to fall apart. The breeze was doing exactly what it said it was going to do. It was dropping, going a little bit west, a little bit south, all around the clock, but dropping. We literally had no breeze, 4 or 5 knots, pretty glassy, but still a really confused sea. So we get up, Paulie and I get up, the spinnaker's got to come down. Because when they put the spinnaker up, we were travelling quite nicely, and the breeze did what it was supposed to do, drop. So no breeze, nothing. So we tried to get it down. And it turned out that there'd nothing been hoisted on the fractional kite halyard prior to this, which may not, we don't know, still don't know what the problem was. I mean, it could have been stripped casing, anything, just don't know. But we could only release about 1 metre, we could pull up 1 metre, but it wouldn't go any further. So I suspect it was tangled up with something inside, or there was a knot or something. So I've got a spinnaker stuck up there. We've got 5 of us up. Max, we put Max on the helm then, where he remained for the next 24 hours. Paul was looking after the winches and strings and things, and we just tried to get this thing down, just wouldn't come down. So after much discussion, Harry volunteered to go up, and we talked about it lots, but in between holding the spinnaker and doing other things. Possibly, well, I know he should have gone up on the headsail halyard, because that was the closest to the fractional kite halyard where it exited the mast. And I was hanging on to the spinnaker, so I didn't follow that through, which I perhaps should have. In retrospect, it's probably one of the biggest mistakes we made, because it was right at the start of the. If they had gone up on a fractional halyard or which we didn't have, but on the headsail halyard, he wouldn't have lost his grip as he did. Well, I wouldn't have thought he would. Talked to Harry lots about it, about whether he's okay to go up. He said he'd been up before, and fortunately, M3 being well and truly set up for ocean racing, all the required stuff, climbing harness, helmet, all of the stuff that often we don't think of. So Harry comes up with the helmet on, up the top of the mast. And this should be a doddle. We've all done it before, lots, all of us, I would say. And it's not hard. You go out there, spike the halyard. People hang on until they get the kite sorted. Come down again. Well, that was great. So he did exactly that. Spiked the halyard. I migrated to the port side of the boat. Faris was on the starboard side. Paul was on the halyard, looking after Harry at the top of the mast. Max driving. He got the kite down, whatever. And about this time, Harry lost his grip. So if you imagine he's on the masthead halyard, we've got about 1 metre, maybe 1.5 metres of fractional halyard out. So we had to actually reach to spike it. Again, I'm not sure whether we pulled it back in. We're down the bottom, he's up there, it's night time. Yeah, who knows. Anyway, he lost his balance, and I looked up to see him doing a couple of laps around various bits of the top of the mast. What I could see, he went around the back of the sail, and being a square top sail and reef, he caught on the headboard and locked the main halyard. Right, so he's gone once around the mast. He smacked into the side of the mast, and he told me later he actually slipped partially out of the climbing harness at that stage. Then, because if we had have had a full main, he probably would have hit the side of the main and bounced back and maybe been okay, but because we had the mast down a bit, he came across the top again. I'd say he's weighing himself up a bit, and then somehow he went around the forestay as well, top of the forestay. And so he's jammed between the forestay and the mast. Not very happy. Half out of his harness, cut, bruised, shot, and from judging by the bump on his head when we got him down, probably in and out of consciousness. At the same time, so I'm on the port side, we pulled everything in. I yelled out to Max to put, because he dropped the engine into neutral while we were recovering the sail for all obvious reasons. Another minor mistake we made there, which I'll get to in a sec, but he yelled out, "Is there anything over the side?" Which is in our DNA, it's what we do every time we do some sail work like that. Well, it's what I hope we do anyway. Mine, I actually put my hand on my sheet. Farris said his was okay. Turned out his wasn't, but you know, there was a lot of action happening at the time as well, so we all know they can slip over. We've all done it. There wouldn't be a person that doesn't go out there sailing that hasn't dropped a sheet over the side and got it around a prop. So Max puts it into gear, engine stalls. Okay, so we've got a line around the prop. So now we've got a guy at the top of the mast. We've got very little way up because there's not much wind. The boat's flipping even more because we've got no way up. Harry's sort of not very happy. He's a few words and get me down and get me out of here and all the rest. So we're at a fairly sticky point. And you see this was taken from Mission Performance, the Clipper Ventures vessel that came and assisted us. You see he's just below the top of the forestay, so he'd actually gone around the forestay, and every now and then when he lost his balance, because he was hanging on the forestay, he got stuck in between. But this was actually when he'd been almost, the halyard's almost been cleared. You see Gavin there as holding the halyards out, and it actually was a very simple matter to get him down in the end. But so we had Harry up there. Right? We had the first thing we tried to do was the headsail halyard. Right? Obvious thing to do. We still had the headsail in the foil, so I thought, we'll pull that down. It'll be inside all the halyards and things as he's wrapped himself around. We'll just pull it up to him and he hook on that and come down. Well, didn't quite work that way. I go forward and pull on the sail. This is this is number 4, wasn't it? 4. The sail, and I must have eaten a lot of Weet-Bix that morning because either very heavy or very strong. I don't think I was either. At parted company where the tape hits the top of the sail. So now we've got tape in about 3 or 4 metres up. Still hooked the halyard, so as soon as the thing flapped around a bit, it went up another quite a few metres. So no headsail halyard. Okay, back to the mast. All right, had the pulley. Let's have a go at dropping the main halyard. Started to drop the main halyard, and Harry started yelling a bit more. So what was happening was he was getting dragged back into the mast, and it was tightening everything. So that didn't work either. Because he'd wrapped around him, we couldn't. There was one other halyard there, but we couldn't free it. So the only halyard we had that we could actually use was the staysail. And as you can see from there, Gavin's at the maximum hoist of the staysail there. So it was a long way shy of the top. So a bit of a discussion, and we sent. Farris decided he would have a go. So we sent Farris up. Farris is a small guy. He's a really nice guy. Obviously very experienced yachty. We pulled him up there. On the way up, he injured his arm or his shoulder, he said, and he got very worried. Very worried. I was pretty worried, but he was even more worried. So he was up there for about 15 minutes trying to communicate with Harry, who was in shock, trying to yelling, "Get me down, get me down," and a lot of other expletives that we could hear. So after about 10 minutes we got Farris down, and he was not in a good way. And it's not. We all handle stress differently. He handled it differently. So we put him downstairs, and that's where he stayed until we left the boat pretty well. So now we're down to Max with his arm in a sling, steering. A very young 70-plus-year-old, and somebody not that shy of it either. So that was the O moment. I sat at the bottom of the mast, and I've been bouncing off Max and Paul what they thought, and really we were all a bit nonplussed. So I had a bit of a serious talk to myself, and then went back and I've been watching the clipper boats and the other boats around us, and the closest boat to us was Clipper Ventures. Was it? Yeah, Mission Performance from Clipper Venture, because I'd done the Hobart, and they were on their way up to the Whitsundays for their leg of the race. So the closest, I've got a couple of charts in here, but next couple down, which will show you where we were. But the closest boat to us was Mission Performance, and also, being a clipper boat, they would have a qualified medical practitioner on board. They would have a big crew, a professional skipper, and they'd done a few miles, so they obviously knew their stuff. So I tried to call them, and I got through to VMR in Forster, which is about 60, 70 miles from where we started. The guy there was really good, as most of these guys are. Cool, calm. He was able to get onto the Clipper Ventures vessel. Had a talk to him on HF. We eventually worked out a channel that worked. And they said they'd be with us in a couple of hours. Well, it took them about a fair bit longer than that. Because they're a big heavy boat, even though they had the current with them, we had the current with us, so we were drifting away. And to keep the boat steady, we'd actually facing a little bit north, because the northerly breezes were there, even though they were light, 3 or 4 knots, 5 knots. To keep the boat as steady as we could, we were sort of heading slowly out to sea, so we're actually going away from them all the time, at only a couple of knots. But these things, I mean, they sail really well, but they don't motor that well, I don't think, and big heavy boat. We also, at the same time, we were talking to the Water Police and VMR Port Stephens. Port Stephens was under Water Police, and I was doing these comms between going up and down, because Paul was indisposed upstairs, always looking after the boat, making sure Max was doing the right thing, and the other guys were, well, one was up there and one was in the boat. So the Water Police agreed to, they were tasked to come and assist. With the conversations I had with the mission performance, they had an actual doctor on board, so that was really good. So we talked about getting their masked man over, maybe one other person, and the doctor. That was the plan. It didn't quite happen that way. When they arrived, it was obviously daylight saving. It's starting to get light, even though it's 3:30, so it was just starting to lighten up. They did a couple of drive-bys for, you know, I don't know what they weigh about 20 tonne or something, 25 tonne, I don't know. And we weighed about 7 or 8 tonne. We're like a cork and they're like a, I don't know, torpedo. It wasn't going to happen gunnel to gunnel, it just wasn't. The sea, it was still probably 3 or 4 metres seas from each direction when they came together. So it just wasn't going to happen. So we had another long discussion and they did a sea transfer. So pretty much before you could blink, they'd thrown a line over, Paulie grabbed it. As Gavin jumped off their boat and we pulled him in. And so it worked really well and very brave, you know, just on dawn, it was, you know, pretty special. But just before he left the boat, the skipper said, when he was actually using my name, which is really good because I don't think I was panicking or whatever, but it was that calming that, you know, he was using my name, my first name. He called the call sign and said, yeah, Michael, are you there? And it did make a difference. So it's perhaps something just to remember, put in the memory bank, you know, there's all the radio protocols we do, but just those little things, particularly when you're one-on-one, that does make a difference. And he says, Michael, Gavin's deaf. So this is the guy that's sitting over. So he's got hearing aids, but unfortunately he came with 4, 2 have failed, and he doesn't really want to bring them with him. So, yeah, okay, all right. But he lip reads really well. So here we're going to send a guy up the mast to talk to somebody metres away. Yeah. So let's go on. Yeah, well, at least it's helped. So, anyway, he's on the deck. So I took him to the base of the mast, had a bit of talk to him, and he seemed to understand what I said. And our aim was just to untangle enough halyards so that Harry could come down without being dragged back into the mast or whatever. The aim was for the headsail halyard, which was floating up there. If you can manage to get that, or if you can pull it to him, or if Harry had have pulled that to him, even though we'd lost it, if he had have had and I thought of it and I could communicate it, he probably could have pulled that up to him, even though it was round and round and round many times by that stage. So yeah, it actually didn't take that long. Now, we've got a video here that came from Mission Performance, which sort of, it's a bit of a preamble, but it shows you a little bit. It's about this is the, which one of the rest on?
You were nominated for a Yachtsman of the Year award. Unfortunately, it didn't go to you, but how much have you enjoyed the day?
Oh, it's been a fantastic day.
This is the award presentation.
I was sitting on the table with Elliot, young Elliot, who won the Top World Championships and was a very deserved winner of Young Yachtsman of the Year. So that was actually lovely to meet him and his parents. And then a very well-deserved win by Gavin. When I saw the video of the rescue, it took me back to when I was stuck up the mast on my Vendée Globe, and I really wished Gavin was there at that time. So absolutely full credit to him for the bravery to climb up the mast with no halyard for much of it and save someone's life, and actually probably save possibly everyone on the boat who were just incapacitated. Hugely well-deserved victor.
The winner of the Boats.com YJA Yachtsman of the Year for 2016, I'm delighted to say, is Gavin Reilly.
And Giles Scott had an amazing year as well. So
he not only did he get the Yachtsman of the Year, he got the Clipper Seamanship Award, which is a Clipper Ventures, I think it's for their top crew person for the entire lap, and the Seamanship Award. So it was pretty impressive and well deserved. When you read the accounts, there's a little bit of poetic license in the description of what he did, but he came to a boat, dawn, didn't know the people, deaf, and helped us out. I mean, as I said, the untagging was relatively simple, because by this stage the police boat had arrived as well, and I think Harry's whole mindset had changed after being up there for 6, nearly 7 hours. Yeah, he wanted to get down. But he was starting to communicate better. I mean, at the start, when he first got up there, he was seasick, he was bleeding, there was blood on the deck, he was incoherent. We were yelling out to him every 10, 15 minutes, 5 minutes to make sure he was still kicking. Sometimes he didn't answer. And as I said before, as he was half out of his climbing harness, he could have ended up in the drink any time, dead, whatever. And backing up a bit, the way I, perhaps a little different, but the way I coped with having him stuck up there was I got the mindset that I actually couldn't do anything else. We'd done everything we could. You know, if he survived, he survived. If he didn't, I had the rest of the crew. And we talked about, you know, lots of things about cutting the rig away, doing, you know, all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But really, you know, there were some simple things we could have done in hindsight. But when you're faced with that situation at the time, they don't come out to us. I mean, there was three people there. Certainly Paul and Max have done one hell of a lot of sailing, problem solving. So, you know, between the two of them and my small input, we couldn't come up with something. And as I said, in hindsight, there's many things we could have done and I would do differently. But yeah, not put a sheet over the side of the boat in the first place. Because in between this too, we'd been trying to get the sheet off. We talked about somebody going over the side, but then you assess the risk again. It turned out it wouldn't have made any difference because the prop had actually fallen off. Right, we just want to get a drink or something, spend some money at the bar. Just have a couple of minutes and then we'll get back into it.
When you want Max, the ones who want several things in a row, that all accumulate the biggest disaster. They all change the stars and sort of when you get your resources, your knowledge, your sort of 70-30. So someone in Florida, he went up to the top of the mast and suddenly and he was going to come off and down. He had a heart attack. And he was dead. And she floated him into Florida. As soon as he went away, the seagull was attacking the beach. But even if it's the whole yeah, okay, you get out there with 8 groups, whatever you're doing. If it's all up, it's hard, yeah. Are you ready now? Come on, guys, we're behind. Oh, okay. Pictures for you. He was starting on a and they would so we come down to a month later he had hearing aids. He couldn't hear but all he had to do was stand. The sea breeze, so the drop on the sea breeze. So next morning, the sea breeze, we're on down this marks, on the sea on the lake, and sail offshore, so they just go shooting. We got back, we got to midnight on the Saturday, 30 hours later. Now one was so we talk about food, nothing to eat. Warren has this good place in bed, and you know what I'm saying is but all these still in fact, and these dead the whole time. The turn around the week,
You all got your drinks and things? Apparently Cherry said I'm not allowed to run until I finish. Very, very nasty. Okay, so where we are now, we've got 2 injured crewmen in the bunk. We've decided with the clipper boat that we, due to the sea conditions, we wouldn't transfer anybody. While Gavin was recovering on deck, I went down below with Harry. We dragged him, pushed him, crawled. Could barely stand. He wasn't. Got him undressed. There wasn't a bit of him that wasn't bruised, scratched, scraped. Had a reasonable cut on his head. He's obviously dehydrated and probably heading for shock then because he just had another big wake-up call. Hey, just one of the other things. So when he came down, our hearts were in our mouth because he actually came down the forestay. Now, on TPs, on this one in particular, there's nothing to hang on to on the mast much because it's got this particular one. The sail had a bolt rope for about 2/3 of the mast, and the bottom section that you reef had battens, fully batten card. So once you go past that, there's nothing to hang on to it, just slippery, slidey. Even the stays on this thing are foil-shaped, carbon sharp, you know, because they go fast. So Harry, in his wisdom, gave us a heart attack because he came down the forestay. Well, unfortunately, he didn't actually bring the forestay halyard down with him, but he slid down it, and the risk in those sea conditions is he could have wrapped himself up again, lost his balance because you're at the end of the boat's moving lots. So that's when Paulie came into his own, and he pretty much just dropped him, and he ended up a metre or so from the deck, and then we put him on the deck. But it was really risky. So it's not a good practice in those sea conditions. I mean,
so how long was he up there for?
How long? From about 9:15 at night till about 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, gosh.
Seven. I reckon about 7 hours thereabouts. The thing that saved him, saved a lot of trauma, was he actually, because he slipped out of the climbing harness. You know, the climbing harness is around your legs and around your back. Because he'd slipped out, it was the big strap was actually on across his bum, and the legs were down. So his blood supply wasn't really. You know, you can see the pictures. His legs were up a little bit. He was probably as comfortable as he could possibly be for 7 hours at the top of the mast.
No snacks.
Yeah. So anyway, so we was talking to the police boat. We talked about transferring the doctor over, but it was just, I've had a bit of a look at Harry, and being the doctor around, decided that he was not going to die in the next 5 minutes anyway. And he was okay, and he was starting to perk up. We gave some water, and he was relatively happy. So we tied him in a bunk. That's where he stayed until we decided to get off the boat. Now, the doctor was prepared to come over, but it was just, you see from the footage that it was a bit lumpy, and even though there was no wind. And we actually nearly lost, well not lost, but it took all of Paulie and my effort to throw Gavin and two big burly policemen to grab him off the front of the powerboat. And they're proper seamen, they come up really close, and it just wouldn't happen. We wouldn't have risked it again. So it'd have to be a sea transfer or nothing, and that was problematic. So Clipper Ventures, the Clipper mission performance disappeared off over the horizon with lots of thanks and a tear in my eye after what they'd done. I might point out I gave Gavin the biggest hug that any male-to-male's ever had, but that's probably thinks I'm a little bit different. So the police boat stood by for probably 3/4 of an hour, Paul, about maybe a little bit longer. They were offered to tow us. The breeze was picking up. We'd come off the breeze. Still had the single reef in the main, but I mean the boat's pretty slippery. We were doing 6 knots, 4 knots, 5 knots, and the breeze had started to sort of migrate from the north to the south as predicted through the east. So it was just wandering around and building. So on these TPs, there's being a race boat, there's virtually nothing to tie to. So if we're going to get tied up, towed, you've got to rig something up. Comes back to the winches. The forestays, a composites forestay with a hydraulic cylinder underneath its tension. There's just nothing on the front other than a few railings and things. And in those sea conditions, we were sailing as fast as they could have towed us. Well, that was my thing. So probably one of the hardest things I've done is to say, well, yeah, you go, we'll call you up when we get to Port Stephens, you can come and help us come in because the breeze will be in by then. Had a long talk to him. I said, yeah, so well, everybody was okay. I had another check on Harry, he was fine. Faris was okay. So we continued on south and we were making really good time. The breeze was picking up all the time. And the way the breeze was going to rotate, it meant that we were going to sail down, be able to just stay on the port tack the whole time, come around and reach in. So we got down to about, I'm not sure where we are there, but down to about that point, which was pretty well a beam of where we wanted to go. About 20 mile out, 18 mile out. We're still in 100 odd metres of water, so the seas weren't standing up. They were pretty big. It was hailing, blowing 30 knots. Rain, lightning, lots of stuff. And at this stage we discovered two things. One, we were having a bit of trouble. It's just the weather. You can see the low coming down. The weather did exactly as predicted. And on the east coast, because they've got so many test points and we give them all the information over here, that's the only reason I know. The weather is really, the predictions are really good. And it was pretty much spot on. So there was while this was happening, the breeze had picked up. We had less breeze out to sea than I did on the beach, as you could see from those weather maps. But they actually had 62 knots in it, the Port Stephens VMR, which is actually inland a bit up the creek. And so over this day, this is from early afternoon. At the same time, there was a boat that was one of the last in the line to leave Port Stephens. It was a 40-foot, 40.7. Pretty sure it was out of Middle Harbour Yacht Club. The helmsman was lost over the side. Now, because you imagine that sort of changes everything. Here's us with a couple of crook people and a boat that's not sailing too well. There's way more priorities than us out there. And what happened was a lot of the boats that had been travelling who were at Port Stephens, nearly at Port Stephens, turned around to go and help, as we all would. Pretty much in the eye of the beast, as it were. And the seas were getting up. I mean, we saw, I saw 50 knots, I don't know what Paulie saw. And the forecast of the VMR said 6 to 8 metre seas. Well, yeah, they were 6 to 8 metre seas. Big. I mean, every second one was breaking over us. So this sort of happened all pretty much about the same time as a little bit before we called up for help. And I've been listening to it on Channel 16, what was happening, and it was unfortunate we weren't able to do anything. So all of these boats turned around. The VMRs from Forster, from Port Stephens, so the police boat, 2 of their vessels, so it's 3 boats out of Port Stephens, 1 out of Forster, went looking, and yachts that were returning from the race. So yeah, it didn't have a nice ending. He was lost. They found him a few days later, about a week later. But in the ensuing chaos, there was 3, if not 4. I think there was 4 yachts in trouble. So the one that lost the helmsman, they had him under tow, and there was another one lost half a mast, and one lost a boom, and another one had damage, and so they're all being towed back. So when I called up and said we're coming in between 8 and 15 knots because we were reaching and very happy, going fast, we're going to be there in an hour and a half, 2 hours. I said, well, can you stop? So we put the part brake on. So we dropped the main, and it's probably the mistake. One of one of the many little mistakes we made was that this was the start of our giving away sea room, which doesn't lot anybody tells you. You've got to have a lot of blue between you and the boat and the lumpy bits, because it doesn't end up nicely. And we got asked so many times, and particularly by Canberra, to close the coast so it was easier for the boats to get to us. And we did it twice, which, again, in hindsight, we just shouldn't have. Because, again, they don't understand the characteristics of the boat you're on. I've got a few points later on, because, I mean, this thing's a cork in the ocean, light, you know, it blows in 40 knots of breeze as fast as most of us can sail, so it's, you know, it was a pretty slippery boat. So we're, that was about where he was lost, north of the island there. And as you see, the weather's getting interesting. It was sort of like a mini cyclone. It's pretty common apparently on the east coast, where they get these really intense lows that go up the coast. And again, you know, we perhaps, in hindsight, we should have just turned left and headed for New Zealand. That's about where we were when we called up, when we turned towards Australia. As you see, it's really deep water there. The boat was fine, we were fine. We're heading in there, no problems at all. But this just was prior to that last slide, I think. We've gone backwards here again. Because I was trying to find that where we were. So this is in the early afternoon. Bear in mind, all of the boats are looking for the lost sailor and assisting other yachties in distress. And I had the conversation and I said, well, don't worry about it. We've got 2 life rafts and we've got, you know, just don't worry about it. You know, sort yourselves. We'll look after ourselves. We're happy at this stage. Again, probably in retrospect, I should have declared a Mayday then. I think you probably should call them a little earlier than you really think, because yeah, things happen in a hurry when the breeze gets up. So we were drifting about on that course north. We dropped two. We had 2 sea brakes, so we dropped those over the side, and we had inadvertently, through my mucking around on the foredeck, managed to drop the number 4 over the side, still attached to halyard, as I had it jury rigged, because we couldn't go up the forestay, so I tied a few knots in the top of the sail and to shorten it, so we could pull it up inside, and we had it on the staysail halyard, which didn't work particularly well, but it did give us some drive. But we had it strapped on tight at the bottom, and we dropped it down because it wasn't doing it, and went over the side. And all of a sudden, when I went downstairs and checked our drift, we'd sort of at the half from sort of scooting 8 knots down the wave sideways to 3 or 4. We're getting white water front to back in the boat at this stage. Every second or third wave would get us a bit wet. Boat still felt great. Max was still on the helm, trying to, even with the sea anchors on, just keeping the boat into the waves. But every now and then we just got completely hammered. And Max being Max, and it's pity he's not here, but this is our Max, and how I guess cool, calm and collected he was, as was Paul. We had this big crash of a wave that sort of front to back of the boat. And I've been downstairs, I stick my head up, and Max was yelling at me, what do you want? He says, get the camera. I said, what do you need a camera for? He says, next time I get smashed with a big wave, take a photo. He wasn't fussed at all, he was enjoying himself. And about this time, we had the main strapped down. The main had started to fail. It was a racing main, one-use racing, well, it had one use in the race up. It had started to fail at the batten pockets, and the battens had started to push their way through the sail. So it was progressively falling apart. So we had dropped to 2 reefs, and then we dropped down, and the sail was pretty much toast after that. And we had the staysail ready, but if you've ever tried to put staysail up on a race boat, you don't bother. It doesn't work. not with 3 crew or 2 crew, me and Paul, Max and help. So we couldn't sail. And about the same time, Max was reporting that the helm was going a bit funny. So a bit funny meaning that you could steer one way really well, but not too much the other. And we went and had a look at that, and the thing appeared to be moving on the quadrant, and a few bolts were flapping around in the bilge. And so then we thought about tillers and cutting, twin wheels, lots of some macrame set in there. And nah, and we're obviously getting hammered by waves and a bit of breeze, and not happening. So we persevered because we did have some control. Another little incident, this will mean that Paul will never come sailing ever again because Ellen's here, but Paul and I were wrapping the main up, trying to stop it blowing apart altogether, and it was a lot of windage, making us go a lot faster sideways than we really wanted. So Paul was on the gunwale side and I was on the inside, the safe bit, and we were both obviously hooked on. And I was passing a line under him and he was passing it over. So we did a couple of laps. We get back to about the winch and the line doesn't come over. Wait, the sail had stopped moving. So I stuck my head underneath and one of the staunches had broken. Paul was wrapped around one and sort of half dragging in the water on the side. So, and me being super fit, I get him out, so I reached in and tried to pull him, couldn't move him. And it was sort of one of those, again, another one of those moments because he was tied on, he was safe, it was whatever, but we were on our ear, every wave's coming over us on the low side. And I said his hand come through, and Max had worked out what was happening and he grabbed one side and we got him up. So that was probably the closest we came to anything nasty happening post the Harry incident. So can you still come sailing? Yeah, so we're drifting north. Lots of communications with the onshore people. In fact, it was a little bit overwhelming. There was way too much communication from them to us. Because by this stage they'd sorted their problems out on shore a little bit, and I had calls from Brent from over here, obviously concerned because he was watching us on AIS, from Peter, the owner, from Canberra, from 2 VMRs, the police and the local police and the water police in Sydney, like not on HF, sat phone and VHF and mobile. And mobile was working by the stage. So yeah, it was a bit happening. So I was sort of, in the end, I was going up and down a fair bit, and I said to Farris, you listen, just call me if they call me up, and ignored it for a fair bit from then on in. When I worked out we were going to be on the beach fairly quickly, and so I then declared the emergency, and that changed everything. That's what I said earlier. You should think about the emergencies a little bit sooner because it changes the whole structure. You know, if you declare emergency, then they do something. But they've talked about diverting a ship to us to shelter us. All sorts of things were happening, but then they tasked a boat, and the only boat the rescue vessel that was suitable for those conditions was this Daniel Thane, the PS 40, Port Stephens. He didn't know that where he is. Yes, it's an ex-British lifeboat, 45, 48 foot long, unsinkable, twin engines, Cummings, just exactly the right boat. Granny bars everywhere, seat belts everywhere, just perfect. They said later it was some of the worst conditions I'd ever been out in, ever. So anyway, they requested that the Sea Rescue asked us to close the coast a bit. Again, big mistake. We managed to do it a little bit. We managed to get a little bit south. But we lost a few miles, which were probably the nail in the coffin. This PS40 is a big boat. I said 40, be 25, 30 tonne. They were upwind of us. I was on the bow, ready to grab a line. Not quite sure what I was going to do with it, but find something to tie it to. And they were drifting down with us. We were still in 40, and I know that because I had a look, we were actually in 40, 45 metres of water, and we were in breaking waves. So, yeah, it was getting up a bit. I mean, we're probably around that area when the big trouble, when we really got into trouble. Now, they were drifting down towards us, and that's it there. And that's a excerpt from one of their reports. But you see the light, that light up there, that was shining on me on the foredeck a couple of waves away. And I saw, I'm not sure what Paul was doing, probably having a rest, but I saw this wave building behind the vessel. It was dark, but there was lightning, and there was the lighthouse was picking up some detail. It got hit side on. It rolled pretty much so that light was in the water. So it almost went over. How it didn't go over, and I heard an engine rev up, because obviously they were upwind of us, and they screwed around to port. And unbeknown to us, they actually lost an engine at the time in the rollover. They'd lost the warp that was ready on the deck, that streamed outside. There was 2 injured crew. Yeah, mayhem. And of course they were gone. So, and rightly so. But they really pushed the limits. It was probably a wave, big wave that came from shouldn't have perhaps been there at that stage because of the depth of water we're in, and it was maybe just a bigger than normal wave. So that wave picked us up, laid us sideways. Again, I was on the bow still, and it's one of those out-of-body moments where it was really interesting that the tip of the mast was in the next wave and just sort of sitting on it, and we were surfing sideways really nicely. It just sat there really calm, it was quiet, and just on the front of the wave. It went really well. And about another 3 or 4 waves of similar size and getting bigger. We felt the bottom, and a couple more. We ended up sort of in the shallows. Well, shallows probably 300 or 400 metres offshore. With these guys, that picture was taken as they pulled it out of the water because they thought they'd damaged all sorts of things when it rolled over. And it took them, I think, 8 hours to get back or 7 hours to get back. It was just, yeah, needless to say, they got an award as well. That's where we ended up. Now, if we had have been that little bit more sea room, we would have got around a couple of headlands. But Yagoon, I think it's right pronunciation, is a national park. And it's really nice beach going south, but a couple of headlands, and then once you're around there, the coast went away. So if you had been just out another 2 mile and a half, we probably would have been okay and ended up being towed in. Yeah, so there was a bit of crunching and banging and clunking when we were hitting the bottom. It was dark but because of the lighthouse just up on that, on the next one around, it was lighting the surroundings. We could actually see the crescent of the beach every now and then, and the lightning lit it up a little bit as well, so that was helpful. Back on the radio to Daniel Thane, they said let a couple of flares off and fire up your second E-perp, which I did. And we got in the boat. Right? And a lot of people ask me why, apart from why we're out there in those weather conditions, which I've had answered, but why we got in the life raft when we're on a boat that was sort of even standing on the ground but still floating. Well, with this, where the proximity to this reef and rocks and lumps, I was convinced we'd end up with matchsticks in the morning, bits of carbon. It really was. I still think it was the right decision at the time, even though the boat decided to follow us the next day. Life raft, we threw it out. Being superhuman again, I threw an 8-man life raft out over the side by myself. Poorly didn't help. And yeah, so you can do things you need. And backing up, I mean, I've got a bit of a reference to training later on, if you're not all too bored. But I've been fortunate enough to do quite a few sea survival courses and offshore training things when I was going out to rigs and stuff. And it's amazing that information you gain over the years is embedded. Like, I asked for a couple of parachute flares, they threw them up, or Ferris threw them up. I didn't look, didn't read, it was there somewhere, I don't know where, but it was there. So you can never have enough training. It's there, and you'll always get something out of it as well, always. But hopefully you never have a situation where you need to use it. So I've got grab bag there. Well, the only grab bag we had was one in it was another mistake we actually made that, like, I didn't go down below for the last little bit, but when the boys came up, the two boys down below, they didn't bring the grab bag with them. But fortunately, Ferris got a couple of phones, one being mine, and a couple of other bits and pieces that were on the nav table in a dry bag, so he grabbed those. And had the handheld VHF, which we promptly lost, which went swimming. Again, back to that grab bags in a good spot. And there's, again, with the abandoning the ship, it didn't actually go that smoothly initially because I'd been downstairs 3 or 4 times. It was pretty obvious good chance we're going to end up on the bricks. And I was impressing, maybe I was too calm, I don't know, I was impressing on Ferris and Harry that they actually needed to put their wet weather gear on and put their PFDs on over their wet weather gear. It took 3 trips and before they actually did it. And the last trip I swore, which I never do much. So just, again, that you've got to be really sure that people understand what you're saying and why you're saying. Maybe explain it, I don't know. Possibly I'm too quiet, not autocratic enough or something, but it's just...
What was your stress level like?
Sorry?
What was your level of stress and anxiety?
Actually, even though it's hard to believe, I mean, neither Paul, Max or myself, it was more interest. I'd had enough stress before then with Harry up the mast. That was the thing that really worried me. This bit was what was happening and you're in the moment, do everything you could. There was no panic, nothing from any of them, any of us really. Yeah, it was just...
And how long were you in the life raft for? Yeah,
it's fine. No, the life raft was good. So we jumped in the life raft. We 3 or 4 waves. Nice surf. They surfed really well. Landed on the beach.
They didn't need a boat hook.
Yeah. So we ended up on the beach, warm and cosy. We rang the police. We let another flare off. Would have called the rescue authorities if they had a radio, but that was somewhere out there. It all went pretty well, and we just set up camp in the life raft, and it was quite warm and cosy, and waited for the police to come. I mean, if you're bored, I'll stop, but we've got a little bit more to go. One of the things that was really impressive was the support we got from everybody. The police picked us up, took us to this Ballandar hotel, which is about 35 k's away, 40 k's away. Tried a couple of places, but they were shut. Knocked on the door. A couple owned it. A lady came to the door, her husband was away. Here's these 5 bedraggled people with nothing, really. I'd kicked the seabirds, I've had nothing. I just had nothing. Didn't know us from a bar of soap. She welcomed us with open arms, gave us 2 big rooms. Obviously wasn't that busy, but gave us 2 big rooms. Disappeared, came back about 10 minutes later. She had this big handfuls of clothes. She'd been in her husband's cupboard and dragged everything that she thought we might be able to use, and shoes and everything, and dumped them and said, oh, you might need these. Then she, bear in mind this is like 2:30, 3 in the morning, 3:30, something like that. Then she said, I'll be back in 10 minutes. So I had a shower and come out and found something that sort of fitted me, and she's out the door again. And she quietly, she said, oh, she took me one side and she gave me $150 cash. And she said, oh, you'll need to feed the boys in the morning, so, And that's the sort of, we had nothing, no credit cards, no nothing. So anyway, so that was then. So obviously we try and go to sleep, and I didn't. So this now is about, 30 odd hours, 40 hours, 30 hours. We couldn't sleep, so we've got to get back to the boat. We've got to see what's left. And so I knew it was in the national park, so I rang the parks people, went to a message bank, left a message, and they subsequently rang me back. Well, where can I get somebody to run us down there? So I went to it's just on daylight, so went to the local NRMA guy. We had a tow truck out the front, knocked on his door, he was having breakfast with his kids, and he couldn't help me. He said, I'll just go down to Servo and ask him, he knows everybody. I went out to Servo, and within 10 minutes, and that's without a shadow of a lie, there was 2 4-wheel drives and a Hilux van sitting on the forecourt, ready to take us down there. And there was a couple of young guys that worked for the local council, and they couldn't work that day because it had rained that much. Broke all the rainfall records for years along the coast. They owned the trees down and all sorts of stuff. So we wandered off, myself, Max and Paul went off back to the boat. When we got there, it's like that, waiting for us. So we were unsure what was going to happen, so we pulled everything off that we could. Just everything, and had it all up at the edge of the national park. Oh, another thing, these guys, I had to organise a key for the gate. And so when this guy was, I've got a key coming for the gate, he said, I don't worry about it, I've got one. They go fishing there all the time and they stole the key. So yeah, the locals, probably as we all would do, but just the country hospitality. Obviously we went back there and we settled up when I had my wallet. This is just me, yeah, just in case you didn't know. Because we've got it made all the papers and the news. They were trying to interview Paulie, but somehow they got me. Lots of people, lots of locals coming down, because the next day was really nice. So, and that damage, that was actually done when the...
Says he just feels lucky to be alive.
Dragged it up the beach.
It's certainly something I never hoped I'd do, and something that we'll never repeat again, hopefully.
Battling 6 metres swell, the 5-person crew hit trouble when a rope became tangled in the propeller.
So we had no engine power, limited sail power, which means we couldn't point.
Marine Rescue sent out a boat, but it was forced to abort after it too got into difficulty.
The sea rescue guys, I mean, they need a medal for what they did. They pushed it to the absolute limit. They lost one engine coming to us.
The crew left with no choice but to jump into life rafts and abandon ship, coming ashore near Seal Rocks.
I called the O, the local police, and they came down and collected us at about 2:30 in the morning, took us off to a nice warm motel.
The M3 had been travelling home after nabbing second place honours in the Pittwater to Coffs race and competing in the Sydney to Hobart. It's expected the damage bill will total in the thousands.
At the moment it looks quite repairable, which is what we're all hopeful for, but yeah, it has taken a bit of a rough knock in the last couple of days out in the ocean.
Difficulty in accessing this remote location has made for an incredibly challenging salvage operation, And with wild surf expected to continue over the next couple of days, the window of opportunity is small.
For Sunday, 2 days away, so we're hopeful that. At the moment the seas are way too rough, but the forecast is looking favourable. If we miss that, it might be another week or so.
Sally Rafferty, NBN News.
So that was the second morning that we were there. Peter had been on the phone to his insurance company. He was a little distressed. He'd organised this assessor to come down. He came down from Sydney. He'd organised an excavator. These guys were from Noakes in up the coast, and they pulled it. I've got some pictures a bit later on, but they pulled it apart in no time flat. And if they hadn't got out on the Sunday, it wouldn't have gone. It'd be carbon fibre bits on the beach. But they were really keen to get it off. They initially, Park said, "You've got to break it up." There's no, they just said, "Got to break it off." But then they got told that there'd be lots of little bits of carbon fibre left, doesn't matter how careful they were. So they said, "No, you've got to move it off the beach." So they did. So that's the process. The excavator, they dug a hole, well, pulled the rig off with the excavator, dug a hole. Fortunately, we had the T-bar and socket for the keel on board. It got left on for some reason, so I knew where that was. So dropped the keel into there, put the rig on the top of the boat, and then patched up the holes. So they've got a sail drive, so the leg was patched up, rudder was out, it was patched. They just tech screwed some stuff on there with lots of goo. Put a couple of tonne of sand in it, and waited for the tide to come in. You see that there's still a few waves there. Yeah, that's the towboat out there. A young guy swam in with a line through the surf, and he's actually on board on the back. He rode it out. The keel's gone. The keel got trucked off. They were a little bit excited. Got too much slack. It was nearly, the very last wave, they nearly lost it. They went sideways.
So were you all on board then?
The keel was on a truck.
Yeah, but were you on board?
No.
When you have a fancy event like that,
So it ended up back at Noakes and Newcastle, and it was starting again at that 4 months. That's where they came from. Okay, so that was it. And then post the event, we thought it.
Max.
Yeah, that's Max. Yeah, he's here. Yeah.
Sorry.
Post the event, we thought pretty important we go and visit them and thank them, even though they did save us. They didn't quite get to us. We arrived. They'd just done their debrief, and because it was pretty serious, I mean, there's people injured on their boat on the Daniel Fane. That guy there was the skipper of the Daniel Fane. Obviously somebody had died on another vessel, so there was it was their, I guess their come down from that, and I must say that I'm not very good at this public speaking, but I stood up there and I talked to them about how we appreciated they coming, and I suspect there was a wet eye or two here or there. But I did impress upon them that they need to know the boat, try and find out about the boat they're coming to rescue, because they kept telling us to close the coast, and they underestimated the time it would take them to get to us by a couple of hours, and that was really the core of the. I guess I mean we should have been there in the first place, but the core of the rescue dramas. But they were really good. Gave them a donation a little while back, a little while after that, and the commander there rang me 4 or 5 times to make sure I was all right. So yeah, post-event, so it was good. Yeah, I just put some things here which I've covered a lot of them, and I think I've explained a few of them on the way through, but really gets back to knowing your crew's capability and training as well, because you just need to know people and what they're good at and what they're not. I was fortunate with Paul and Max. The other two were injured, crook, whatever, so they can do anything. They've got to skip the boat themselves. There's no dramas there. But you really need to know that, so if, you can't have too many weak links, even in a delivery, because it just creates havoc. The trip planning we did, I think, really well. We had plenty of outs, plenty of places to go. If the weather front came through more quickly than we anticipated. But obviously my instructions, or my suggestions that we weren't going to put a spinnaker up, missed the mark somewhat. So again, that's it's one thing that I've taken away from it, that you're really specific in what you tell people and ask them to do. And the other really important one is if you deviate from any plan at sea, you need to communicate it to all, as they should have to us, and if we change something, we should have to them. I know we don't do it a lot, but we should tell our sea rescue people, or somebody should know, that knows how to press the panic button. We did. Like I spoke to Forster before we left. So yeah, that was good. The guy sort of recognised who I was. Yeah, and the problems were off. That goes without saying. One thing that I know a lot of cruisers have, because they're often short-handed and the race boats don't, is the method of getting up there if you can't use a halyard. And lots of us have halyards either tied to the bottom of the mast or something hanging from the top that you can get down. I haven't done it yet on my boat, but I think it's something that's it's probably really worth thinking. But I've got their helmet, gloves, long sleeves, long legs. Harry had long pants on, short sleeves. Didn't have any gloves. Had a helmet and my head torch, which he lost. He dropped. But if he hadn't had the helmet, he'd be dead. Simple. The way he hit that mast with his head, he'd be dead or a lot sicker than he ended up. And they're cheap. I mean, they're just cheap waterproof harness. The radio comms, my reason I put that there was because we were getting so many conflicting requests from so many different emergency departments. It got to the stage where I gave up on it all and just talked to the vessel that was coming out to us. And I did get chastised about that a bit later on when I did get a letter from AMSA saying that my communications I didn't communicate efficiently. But when they're calling you on a mobile and calling you on HF, and then the sat phone's ringing as well, you know, and you're trying to save the boat. Yeah, again, sea anchors. I mean, this thing there's a couple of hard points up the back, up the front that worked really well, off on the port side. But I know a lot of boats don't have things because you want to be slightly side onto the sea if you're streaming off the bow. So we discovered. And you need solid ones at the back because there's a hell of a lot of load on them, and retrieving them is a task, no Paul. Sea room, yeah. But, yeah, I can't. I've got that 2 or 3 times in there because you can't impress upon us enough that you need sea room. And call emergencies early. Yeah, and the crew understanding what's required when we get off the boat. I mean, Paul and Max were upstairs, so it didn't matter, but the other guys downstairs just didn't seem to understand the gravity of the situation and what we had to do. And it's possibly, well, it had to be my fault because I'd spent the whole time calming them down and telling them we're fine, nothing was happening, even though we were hearing the radio going like mad, that we were okay. I perhaps said, no, we're not okay, we're in the ship, we've got to get off the boat. AIS, that, you know, it's really common now, but I know a lot of cruising boats still don't have it, and really you just wouldn't go to sea without it. And yeah, and the training, as I said, the training is, yeah, as expensive it is and as a pain it is doing it and keeping it up to date, you've just got to do it. And that's me. I hope I've answered all the questions so I don't get bombarded, but somebody's going to come up with a really hard one probably.
No, it's going to be an easy one. So how come you couldn't keep at sea with the weather? I know you were told to go.
Because we couldn't steer. We could steer to port but not to starboard. And we didn't have an efficient sail to do it. We had a headsail tied, well, because it was too long to fit on the staysail halyard. So I tied knots in it, in the tape, and hoisted it up there, which was when the boat was on the beach, it was still in position.
So, but
we were driving out.
It worked better as a drogue, as a...
Yeah, it worked better as a drogue than a sail.
So you were talking about sea anchor. If you want to go to starboard, for example, if you...
Yeah, but because we had no, you know, we're bare poled. I mean, possibly could have sailed, you know, possibly, but we couldn't steer either at this stage. Because the helm was pretty much locked in one direction. So really not a lot we could do. Yes, Terence? You'd have to have one.
Oh no, I'll just stand up because I'd like to say thank you. That is probably the best display of humbleness, seamanship, warts and all that I've heard in all my time at the Sailing Club of how you do it and how you don't do it. And so thank you for doing that. You're very just ultimate, mate. Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, you and I were sat in the bar a couple of times. You've shared some of the stories, so I know it's deep in your psyche now, and it has cut deep. My question is, yourself and your crew, post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, we talk about now, but this is something that's going to live with you for the rest of your life. How do you cope with that, mate?
We went sailing with Rocket the week after. That was enough to cure it.
Are you sure? No, are you sure?
No, it was fine. I mean, I must admit, I'm not an emotional person, I don't think, but when I was standing up with other sea rescue guys and knowing what they'd gone through to help us, you know, that was pretty tough. But yeah, because we were in it, we lived it, I don't think it was... I certainly know Paul and Max are fine. The other guys I don't know. I've spoken to Paris a few times.
So big boys don't cry?
Well, yeah, probably do, but, well, I do. But yeah, I don't think it was more traumatic for the people on shore, I think. You know, the calls we got in that first day were just amazing, you know, from people wanting to support us, which was great.
Thank you.
That was good. Gully?
Did the bulb fall off the keel, or was it
No,
buried in the sand?
no, it was fine, mate.
So it was just buried in the sand?
Just, yeah, they dug a hole and buried it, yeah. Phil?
Mikey, I just want to reiterate part of Terry's comment about how much I admire you stand up and doing this. But I do have a question. So, how have you changed how you sail in dolphin based on?
Just look at the starts. About 2 minutes later. No, I've certainly changed.
We've got to get it in the water first.
Yeah, sure.
And the mask on.
Yeah, mask on.
Put a mask on it.
Yeah.
It's easy from the heart, son, isn't it?
I'm certainly more cautious when there's less adrenaline. Paulie and I did a little sail last year, and yeah, I mean, I was feeling good when we got to the corner for whatever reason, so we stopped in Albany. In the past, I probably would have just kept going and let him run the boat. But yeah, I'm just a bit more cautious. Certainly when it comes to people going up the mast at sea, you know, and people going up the side and stuff like that. Yeah, really, yeah, that has changed, and it's probably slowed me down.
I've got this new design for a mast.
Have you? I'll take yours. Yeah, but I don't think it has affected it, but not.
Kind of easy, isn't it? Friendly time.
Anybody else?
How long were you in the life raft for?
10 seconds.
Yeah, it felt like 10 seconds. Everything felt like 10 seconds, but probably it was 3 or 4 waves before you hit the beach. We were probably 250 metres off, maybe. The sort of the start of it.
Right on the beach.
But the way the waves were, as you can see from that, it's a nice shelving beach, really nice beach. Yeah, the way we just sort of surfed in, got a bit of what we wanted the first wave, and because we're sheltered by the boat, at the first peak nothing was breaking the waves, and we sort of went in under its lee. When we got off, all the lights were on, everything was on. Obviously, it didn't turn in. The engine was still running because of so many radio comms and stuff. We just left everything on, and when the water disappeared, it wasn't running anymore. So it ran out of fuel. Ran until it ran out of fuel.
So when you got that line over the prop at the beginning, there was no chance that somebody could just jump and just sort it out?
Somebody at
right now?
No, with 3 people on the deck. Right? And we did try. What we did was, and it was something. I mean, the prop shouldn't fall off ever. Put enough on to know they shouldn't fall off. Even if you get them locked up, you'll lock it up. But it just shouldn't fall off. So there was obviously something not quite right with it. And I did allude to it before, but one of the mistakes we made was when we put the engine in gear, we should have actually left it in gear and stopped the engine. She's telling me to speak up. Sorry, Cherry. Because we were sort of drifting forward, so the prop still would have been rotating. Any line over the side is going to get grabbed. If we had stopped the engine in gear, even at lots of slow speeds, it would have folded, and maybe it wouldn't have caught. Maybe it wouldn't have fallen off. We did try cranking it, because we were going forward when obviously the prop was going forward when we got it tangled up. So we put it in reverse and hit the stop button and cranked the engine backwards to try and unwind it. It sort of worked. We got a few metres of line up, but wouldn't have made any difference because there's no prop. So, yeah, you had to get one from you. Yeah, come on.
I told you beforehand I wouldn't disappoint, but it was, as Terry started to say, it was a masterful presentation. Really riveting and honest and so forth. My question is really about experience, and you've talked a lot about the different crew and their reactions, and some are older and some are younger. And I was thinking about it in terms of the qualifying sails for Bali and for Exmouth and so forth, for a lot of sailors around the club who haven't done ocean passage, and certainly as many as you've done. And I wonder how much, in your view, the experience actually helped your survival. Even though there's mistakes, I understand all that, but still, you as crew had to survive.
Yeah, it certainly helps. And I mean, you look at my mate Paulie there, You know, I've known Paulie for 35, 40 years. You know, he first went to sea on in Denmark in the winter. So he's got a little bit of experience. But yeah, so it's, yeah, training and experience, they don't necessarily, I mean, training's really important. Experience, I mean, you can't get experience without doing it. So, yeah, I guess it's more mental, you know, as far as suitability for taking the crew person to Bali or a longer race or even round the Cairns. It's probably, from where I sit, it's really attitude more than anything else, and understanding that person. Gully.
Just a quick one. How did you get into the life raft?
I don't know. I jumped on top of Paul. Because he was already in.
So you have it tied to the boat alongside?
Yeah. No, what we did, we threw it over the side, popped it, I pulled it back to the side of the boat, tied it off, and everybody got in. And then, as you know, as you're supposed to, I was the last one in, of course, wasn't I, Paul? But I just had a look around before I decided to get in. I thought, well, I had another think. You know, one of those own moments, is it the right thing to do? And then, yeah, the next big wave told me, yeah, it was. So I jumped in it, and Paulie cut the painter, and we went ashore.
So was it high side or low side?
Low side.
Low side.
So the boat was sheltering us against the life raft, against the waves and the wind. It was just streaming out. The wind was a little bit from the south, up the bum of the boat, but the waves, the swell, which was pinning it, that was from directly out to sea. And we're really fortunate. It was a you know, gradual sloping beach, as you can see from the pictures. And, you know, it was a hard landing, but not that hard.
Yes, yeah, thanks, mate, and well done.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, Robin?
Paulie, we'd like you to say something.
Yeah.
How do you feel about our man?
No, I'm not into that.
So anyway, that's
just one last thing. I mean, just a statement, and you've reinforced in spades. The skipper is the ultimate responsibility of the whole thing, and then you've stood up and you've said that. Well done, mate. It doesn't always come back to people going out the water there that you are ultimately responsible everywhere on your boat. If it's just going to rot this, whatever, you're making life decisions or life and death decisions about people's lives and what you do, and particularly when you have, I know in my early days of sailing, I had people come on board with more experience than me or more qualifications than me, and they would assume control. So I think what the point you made tonight, that you're responsible, you're it, is so important, and people have to take that on board.
Robbie? Yes. Yeah, well, that's just about us, I think. I think Robbie is going to say a few words as well. I'll hand you back to Steve.
Thanks, Mike. If Robbie could come forward, Robbie's just going to give us an update about John Sanders in a minute. But before we do that, we'd very much like to thank you, Mike, for that. I mean, you've given us a lot of detail, I must say, in that, and learnings for all of us, I'm sure. So, on behalf of everybody, we'd like to thank Matt. From the comments here, from a number of you, I think, you know, they're feeling that, you know, Mike's shown us some leadership there to be able to open up and share that story, which I'm sure isn't easy after such a harrowing time. But fantastic you're prepared to share for the benefit of the rest of us, really. So, thanks.
Sorry guys, you've got my face. We go from one local hero, because Mike's one of mine, and my other one's sitting over there, Phil. We all woke up one morning and saw you all over TV and were riveted, and so pleased to, like many of us, count you as one of our close friends. So we go to another person we count as our close friends, and that's John Sanders. John is currently in Bundaberg. His boat's been lifted out. His new motor's been installed. He is hoping, typical John, to leave about next week. His aim right at the moment, we hope, is that he'll be in Sydney around Christmas. He'd love to sail out with the Sydney to Hobart fleet, but whether that happens or not, we don't know. Ron's got that in hand somewhere, haven't you, Ron? And he's aiming at this stage to be home on Australia Day. And we think if he can sail into Fremantle Sailing Club on Australia Day, we'll get the biggest flotilla we've ever seen out in Gage Roads to welcome him in. So what we're doing, I think most of you, I hope that you know, John suffered 2 major knockdowns out of Tahiti, without electrics, without navigation and with no motor. He sailed his boat into Bundaberg where he was towed in, which he told me was one of the most humiliating experiences of his life. What we're doing is all of John's contingency money got sucked out by having to replace his motor essentially. So we are the group, not the Fremantle Sailing Club, let me say very clearly, members of the Fremantle Sailing Club started a fundraiser for him. We've got a GoFundMe or a what's it called, guys? My Cause. My Cause Fund page. And Terry McClure, who's also a member here, is organising a quiz night next Wednesday night. It's been a bit disjointed and we acknowledge that, but we've got it together fairly quickly. This is John right now with his team and his boat coming in. Minderoo Foundation has said that they will match every dollar we get for $1 up to $20,000. So we need to raise a little bit more for John. So if you can come to the fundraising. Sorry? How much will we got? I think tonight about $6,000. 4.5 or 5 on the my whatever it's called page. I should know, I started it. My Causes page, and we are 14k short right at the moment to have $40,000 for John. Thank you, Rocket. And it's been a lot of hard work to get here. Hopefully, guys, Anita is going to walk around with the ice bucket, our wonderful ice bucket, and collect some monies. Are you looking at the go?
I'm just showing them the balance. It's just $5,325.
There you go. We got $326 since I last looked, and which is why I said nearly $5,000. Plus, we've got cash. We've got probably $1,000 in cash or thereabouts sitting in the safe here. So what Anita is going to do, those of you who are coming to the fundraising and those of you who have already given money, please don't put in again. But if you can just, any sort of spare change, anything. Now I spoke to John today and he wanted to tell you all that he loves us all very dearly at Fremantle Sailing Club. He can't wait to step ashore here, and that he thanks you all from the bottom of his heart for our support, contributions and belief in him to get here. Okay, thank you very much. Any questions that I can answer?
Everything is not doing anymore.
No, they don't do that anymore.
All right. See you soon. See
Yeah,
you.
fine.
Okay, where is the bucket? Give us some money. Brochures.
Did
Someone come and see? Yes, someone come and see.
Did you come down and have a look?
Oh, you did, yeah. I don't think I'm
Cheers, thanks. Anyway, thank you, love to meet you. I'll see you at West Night. Yes, you will, Bill.
So we but you got a few beds down here. Down here and you need someone to camp.
I was going to say,
the plumbing went to shit tonight.
You want your new plumbing?
My plumbing.
That's what sort of cement.
It's got a bit wet. I've seen the doctor already.
Chris said you were going to the doctor.
I took watching off the line.
Did they do a discount?
No, you're on it. So he'll ring me and say, but he said it happens. It happens all of a sudden. They just half a day they break up. Well, not start again. So yeah, we'll see. Well, I'll... Of course, Barry and I actually talked about him. That's great. We've spoken before. All right, Barry. I'm going to head off. Yeah. Timing was right. We got another boat. When we were there. No.
That guy had a lot of bad luck. I wouldn't get out of bed.
Really was getting killed and things like that. And all I could think about was bloody country was working. And I spent the whole day. I eventually got it.
No, I remember that one.
Well, I was going to say, I did in sales for many years, and we always put a shop in the